My privilege to introduce Dr. Nitin Kotkunde, Assistant Professor, BITS, Hyderabad. He holds his Master's and PhD from Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Pilani University, India. His area of expertise is material testing and characterization, material model development, and its implementation in finite element analysis of manufacturing process. He has published many reputed articles, 30 journals, and 25 international conferences in the area of metal forming. His articles appear in high impact factor journals like Materials and Design, Materials and Manufacturing Process, Journal of Manufacturing Process, Journal of Material Forming, and so on. He has been awarded Early Career Research Grant by Department of Science and Technology, DST, Government of India. He also received Prestige International Travel Grant from Department of Science and Technology, DST. He is a reviewer of many reputed international journals. Now I welcome Dr. Nitin sir to take over the session. Thank you, sir, for being with us. You can share your screens. Swadesh sir, can you please make co-host? I think sir has again logged out. Okay.
Hello. Hello, madam. Is my voice?
Yes, sir. It is audible.
Yeah, because I try to unmute it, but I think host has muted. That's why I'm unable to do that. Now I will share my screen. Okay. Yeah. So the slides are visible, madam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So shall I start now?
Yes, sir. You can start.
Okay. 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 Good afternoon to everyone. So I think you are here for the FDP program on material characterization and sheet metal forming. So I am going to talk on material testing, deformation behavior, and how to develop the material models for sheet metal forming application. So thank you, Dr. Tanya, to introduce me in detail. As already Madam has given my introduction, so I will skip this slide. So just for the brief, my name is Dr. Nitin Kotkunde. I'm assistant professor in BITS Hyderabad campus, and you can reach me through this email ID nitink@hyderabad.bitspilani. I have done my PhD master from BITS, and I'm working on a sheet metal forming at room temperature, elevated temperature, material modeling, finite element simulation, and so on. So now, and this is just the overview of my publication screenshot. Now, coming back to the background and introduction. As I hope means I will understand that the many of the listener may not have the some information about the sheet metal forming, so I will start from the basic. So the sheet metal forming has an extensive application in various industries, especially the automobile sector. There are many applications like car bodies, many components can be manufactured by using sheet metal forming. So whenever you used to call the sheet thickness means the thickness you used to be less. So problem used to be considered as a plane stress problem. And you can give the intricate shape, complex shape by using the stamping operation, stretching operation. There are many processes in sheet metal forming which can be used to give the complex shape. The other applications like aerospace and aviation sector, then the nuclear industry, marine industry, and then the domestic applications, our utensil and the other things can also be manufactured by using sheet metal. So there are numerous applications about the sheet metal forming, and it is one of the basic fundamental process which industrial people use, because the basic fundamental process, if you see, the casting process is there, then welding process is there, then forming process is there. In forming process, there are basically two dividation. One is a bulk forming and another is a sheet metal forming. So we are focusing here on sheet metal forming. The sheet metal forming means we are using the component as a thin sheet. So thin sheet as a material we are using to give the different shape. So now, if you talk about the material response and related phenomena, because this is plays a very crucial role. If I want to understand the material behavior, if I want to understand the forming process, because forming process is a very complex phenomena. It has punch and die interaction, friction plays a very crucial role, and there are many interdependent parameters. One process parameter is a punch speed, another is a temperature, another is a blank holding pressure, then the punch and die radius, punch and die size, sheet thickness, lubrication used. So there are n number of parameters which affect the overall process and the quality of an component. Our final aim is to produce a quality component. The quality component means defect-free component. We should not have, there are many defects in sheet metal forming. The defect means, like, you can see the wrinkling tendency, you can see the excessive thinning, you can see the cracking in the material, then you can see that tearing of a material, you can see the airing phenomena of a material. So that need to be minimized if I want to produce the components by using sheet metal. The spring back is another issue. So in order to overall improve the quality of a component produced, it is a challenge for the designer and manufacturer engineer to understand the material behavior. And this is one of the prerequisites to produce a quality part. And one of the basic thing to understand the material behavior is to understand the material response and phenomena, because material will go undergone in a different processes. Like usually in a sheet metal forming, the sheet has to be produced by using rolling process, either hot rolled or cold rolled. So the initial manufacturing process plays a very crucial role. When we do the rolling, the grains will be oriented in a one particular direction. So obviously the sheet material will not be an isotropic or orthotropic material. It will become a highly anisotropic material because of the grains are oriented in a rolling direction. You will usually find the superior properties along the rolling direction. So the challenge for the designer is the properties are not uniform everywhere. That make the material behavior and material response more complex. And then we should know what kind of a failure and fracture phenomena or the nature of a material will be there when you start giving the shape, because we are going to work in a plastic region. We are not going to removing the component or the material like a machining. So we have to work from the yield point to ultimate point in between. So if you have this zone as much as the longer, like we used to call as a hardening capacity of a material. So if you have that hardening capacity as a larger dome, means we have a sufficient dome or sufficient breadth to form the component. That means your strain developed in the material should be in such a way that it should be less than the failure strain or the ultimate strain point, and it should be beyond the yield point. So the phenomena will become complex because we are working in a plasticity domain. So one should have a thorough understanding of material plasticity when we start dealing with the material response for sheet metal forming. And therefore, it is very essential to predict or capture the material behavior, material response accurately, so that I can able to simulate it in proper way in a finite element tool. There are extensive finite element tools are available which can be used to simulate the sheet metal forming processes. You can take deep drawing, you can take stretch forming, you can take different kind of an spring back study. So everything is possible by variety of an software like LS-DYNA is there, Abacus is there, ANSYS is there, PAMSTRAM is there, or Atoform is there. So there are many software, and every software has its pros and cons and internal inherent capability to do that. But if you realize and if you're aware about this software, you will realize that the accurate input material properties and accurate material response modeling, if you have, or the material constant you have, you can able to simulate the process more accurately. And because industry usually always try to avoid the trial and error method, because if I want to produce a quality component, you have to vary many process parameters. Let us say punch speed, temperature, blank holding pressure, die corner radius, lubrication, sheet thickness to get the desired and accurate component. So it required excessive trial and error method, which can be lead to a excessive wastage of a material. So in order to avoid that, the numerical tools like finite element simulation, theoretical modelings really plays a very crucial role to simulate the process before do the actual experimentation, and then understand where the failures are happening, what are the drawbacks are coming in a final component, what could be the spring back, what could be the earring tendency, what could be the wrinkling behavior are present or not, what is the excessive thinning, what is the usual thickness distribution, what are the stress level will go, what is the failure strain. So that kind of an overall visualization, we can easily do it by using finite element simulation. So in order to do that finite element simulation, one should have a very trustworthy, chosen appropriate material model. We will see there are a variety of different models are there. So that material models plays a very crucial role. And we are going to discuss this today's talk related to basic fundamental idea of material model, because it's very difficult to cover the overall idea or overall in-depth study about the material modeling within 1 hour. So I will give you overall brief idea of what kind of material models are there, what are the prerequisites of that, what kind of tests are required to do that. So now, first we'll start with the material testing. Dedicated to sheet metal forming, we require different input parameter need to be calculated. So the important material properties we usually require to calculate is uniaxial yield stress. Either it may be by using uniaxial tension test or uniaxial compression test, then uniaxial ultimate or tensile stress, then percentage elongation, then fracture strain value, then strain hardening exponent, strain hardening coefficient. Then usually also we used to require a biaxial yield stress value, because all the sheet metal operation usually used to be done in a multi-axial state of stress. So in order to analyze the overall material response, it is essential to have an understanding about the biaxial yield stress value. Then we should have a Langford coefficients. It is also called as a anisotropy parameter, anisotropy coefficients. Then we should require a biaxial Langford coefficient. So in sum up, we required the uniaxial material properties, we required biaxial material properties, and we required anisotropy coefficients to overall understand the material behavior before starting any kind of a sheet metal forming processes. So usually, if you see in the literature, or we can understood that mostly the uniaxial tensile test is very popular, very popularly used compared with the compression test, because it is material specimen preparation is easy. Usually it is always believed that whenever you are testing a sheet, so that the same specimen or same kind of a specimen need to be tested to get the material properties, because based on the dimension, shape, the properties may vary. Even though the few properties are we call as a properties, but properties also has a range. It is not a fixed one value. So usually the properties will vary based on type of component you will choose. So it is not advisable to have a compression testing for sheet metal forming application. Even though we are applying the load in a compression manner, the major difficulty is for compression testing, we usually recommend to have a cylindrical specimen. It is very difficult to have a compression testing of a sheet. So most of the paper related to sheet metal forming used to prefer to do a uniaxial tensile test. So in a uniaxial tensile test, usually we used to follow ASTM E8/E8M11 standard. So you can search this standard in a Google. There are variety of specimen dimensions are given to test the material. So usually it is always beneficial to follow any kind of a particular standard before doing the test, because the specimen size matter on overall material properties calculation. Material properties are highly sensitive with respect to the specimen dimension. So be careful while choosing the dimension. It is always need to be correlate or with respect to whatever the standards are there. There are Japanese standards are available. There are British standards are available. There are ASTM standard. Usually in India, we used to prefer the ASTM standard. And the basic fundamental requirement for any kind of a standard is the component need to be fell within the gauge length, means somewhere here. Then you can get the pretty accurate calculative material, and your machine should be calibrated properly. Your machine should have a proper operating procedures. Proper care has been taken to measure the data points, so that need or precautions one can be take always before doing the test. So usually for our application, we use a subsize tensile test standard, subsize ASTM E8 standard. The reason behind is that it is subside almost for the 50%. So all these dimensions are given in millimeter. So the original dimensions are around almost double than whatever the dimensions are shown in the figure. That means in order to save the material, we usually recommended to have a subsize standard, but this standard and these dimensions are recommended by ASTM. So it is always proportionally you can decrease or increase the dimension if you require to test it, or you can save the material. Usually for our research purpose, we used to have a 1 millimeter thick sheet for the testing, 1 millimeter thick sheet for the testing. Now, this is the machine we have in our BITS Hyderabad campus. This is a very sophisticated machine for the testing of tensile test, which is recently purchased from the Zwick Roll company. And it is a one of the, the top facility available across the India, because we can test any kind of a material here, starting from the metal, polymer, composite, from single hair to anything. And we can test uniaxial tension, uniaxial compression, as well as 3-point bend test on the same machine. We have a cryogenic chamber. We have a high temperature testing facility up to 1200. So from minus 120 degree to 1200 degree, anything can be able to test it with this. And the one specialty of this machine is we have a green laser extensometer, not red one. Usually the laser extensometer or the any kind of an extensometer used to capture the true stress strain behavior of a material. Usually the normal traditional UTM will usually give the engineering load and displacement data, and then based on the stress and strain formula, we used to convert it into a engineering stress and engineering strain, and after that we used to calculate the true stress and true strain. This is a theoretical procedure to do that, but here we can directly able to capture the true stress and true strain values, which is a more quite accurate compared with the traditional way what we used to do it. And here we are using the laser green extensometer. The reason behind is that some material will become a red hot. If you see this chamber, if you tie the specimen in between and if you start hitting for the 1000 degrees Celsius, some material will become red hot. So if I use the red extensometer, it will lose the connectivity and sensitivity to measure the strain value. Therefore, it is advisable to have a green laser extensometer. So if any researcher who are interested to do the testing on this machine, we are interested to do, we used to do the consultancy, pretty well consultancy on this machine for the testing purpose. We have a two kinds of an load cell. One is for 100 kilonewton, another is 5 kilonewton. So for the smaller application for polymer and all, so we can test it a variety of material on this machine. So this machine we used to have for the testing of an component. So once you test it, so as a researcher, you have to make sure that your machine should be a very robust, accurate, and give a proper result. That is a very essential for to get the accurate material property and trustworthy result to build your material models and everything. Because everything will be depend on this initial material testing. You should have a proper material testing facility. So this is the just I'm not going in detail because most of the people knows about how do you calculate it. So this is usually the standard stress strain graph. You will not get demarcation of an like what you say the upper yield point or lower yield point completely based on the what the stress strain data you will get. Usually you will get the stress strain data like this as a complete dome. But this is a stress strain data taken from the standard test strain data for the mild steel. So there are different demarcation point here. The point A is a professional limit, point B is a called as a elastic limit, point C is a upper yield point, point D is a lower yield point, point is a ultimate point, and F is a factor point. So everybody knows this, and this is usually called as a two strain data. So whenever you want to calculate the material properties, and if you don't have the extensometer with you, it is recommended to use the engineering stress strain data to calculate it. Because if you plot the two strain data, you will not realize where to mark your ultimate point, because the line will keep on increasing it. So remember, every time whenever you will calculate the properties, you have to calculate based on engineering stress strain data. And as I mentioned, you will not get the complete demarcation here. So when the graph is like this, so how do you mark the yield point? So usually we used to take the proof yield strength. Proof yield strength used to take as 0.02% of an elastic strain from here to here. So mark the point here of an 0.02% of an strain, and then start joining a parallel line. Where it will come, that point used to be considered as a yield point of a material. And obviously it is easy to locate the ultimate point. Failure strain also it is easy to locate it. So it is slightly challenging to locate the yield point. Slightly challenging to the locate the yield point. So the yield stress, ultimate stress, percentage elongation means change in elongation to the original length can be easily calculated. Fracture strain means strain present at this point. And the one more important point which is required for the sheet metal forming application is the strain hardening coefficient. The strain hardening coefficient means usually we use the Holman power law. There are other equations also to be used, like a Hose equation is there, Swift equation is there, what you say the Ludwig equation is there. But the basic power law many of the researcher will use, it will fit well to calculate the strain hardening coefficient. So the strain hardening coefficient is nothing but the natural log between the yield point to the ultimate point, which will be usually a straight line, and the slope of this is usually called as a strain hardening coefficient and in exponent. So the K value is called as a strain hardening exponent, N value is called as a strain hardening coefficient. So usually if you have the higher strain hardening exponent, it is a good condition or the good parameter to represent a higher formula. So as high as strain hardening coefficient means it has a high stretching or the deformation capability of a material. It can withstand a more deformation load of a material if you have a higher N value. So it will represent a good sign or better formability if you have a good N value. So as a overall, we want a moderate yield stress, higher ultimate stress, so that the difference between the ultimate and yield stress should be high. That is usually called as a strain hardening capacity. then we should have a higher strain hardening exponent point. We should have a sufficient percentage elongation to form the component. So these are the initial judgment the designer or the researcher used to do it when they start analyzing the any kind of a material response. So this is just a representation of a picture I have shown here at different temperature. What are the material properties for Inconel 718? This data I have taken from my published paper. The details are mentioned here. Microstructure characteristics and comparative analysis of constitutive models for flow stress reduction of Inconel 718 et al. This is published in Journal of Materials Engineering Performance in 2019. So these are the way we used to calculate the property: room temperature, yield stress value. Because why this plus and minus change variation we have seen? Because usually in sheet metal forming we used to test it at different orientation of a sheet. As I mentioned, the sheet is highly anisotropic material, so we should not test it only for the rolling direction or transfer to the rolling direction. So in order to get a overall idea about the material properties, how it is vary with respect to the direction, it is always advisable to at least test a tensile test specimen along the rolling direction, then transfer 90 degree to the rolling direction, 45 degree to the rolling direction. So at least these three specimens we used to test it for different temperature and different strain rate. Here, for this property, the chosen strain rate is 0.01 second inverse. So usually, if you see the normal tensile test we used to do by using constant velocity or speed test. We never used to perform the stress at strain rate, constant strain rate. So what it mean a constant strain rate? Constant strain rate means the strain value, the rate of change of a strain is constant with respect to time. So velocity will not become a constant here. Velocity will exponentially increase. So your computer or the programmable computer which you attach to the machine to run the machine need to have the software modification in such a way that you can get the constant strain rate. The reason behind is that many material models are dependent on the strain rate as a one input parameter, temperature as a one input parameter. Strain value, strain rate and temperature. These are the three processing parameters which are essentially required to build any kind of a material model related to sheet metal forming application. Therefore, we used to prefer to test in a constant strain rate. So usually for the sheet metal forming application, we used to test it for the low strain rate. The low strain rate can be ranging from, you can call as a 0.1 as a low strain rate to 0.25 times 1 as a low strain rate. So as much as possible, the machine has the capability, you can go for the low strain rate, because all the operations at sheet metal forming used to be done at a quasi-static strain rate condition. So in order to achieve the exact replica of what you are going to test it actually, the material also need to be tested at the same strain rate and temperature. Therefore, this plus and minus variation has shown with respect to the orientation change, with respect to the strain rate change. The similar way you can represent the property. Here, if you see the strain hardening exponent are at room temperature is 0.3912, and it has increased or shoot up to around 0.6, which has a good capability of an hardened material. So this material has a good formability tendency. And the modulus of elasticity values are shown here. So usually, one more thing I would like to tell here, how do you recognize that whether the stress strain graph is having with extensometer or without extensometer? Usually this region will not change much. Only if you have an extensometer, your line will close to the y-axis up to the elastic limit, and then it will start in a plastic limit. So if you see the literature, you will realize that if the line is close to the y-axis, means the machine is very perfect, use extensometer and you can able to calculate the E value, because E value is depend on the slope of this line, OA line. So if you don't use the extensometer, you will end up with the wrong result to calculate the E. So my suggestion is, whenever you don't have a extensometer, because in many machines are not equipped with the extensometer, so if you don't have the extensometer, you can always choose the E value from the literature or available handbook. Don't calculate the E value from your own material response. That will end up the wrong value. The finite element simulation will not show the proper result. But if you have the extensometer, certainly you can get the pretty accurate result of maybe 5 to 10% variation than which are reported in a handbook. So most of the handbooks are having the E value of around all material at the different temperatures. So better to prefer that compare with trying to calculate on your own, because E value is highly sensitive towards the usage of extensometer. So I think you are able to understand it. Now the next is compression test. As I mentioned, many researchers are also using the compression test because of the two reasons. One is the specimen preparation is very simple. Mostly we know that the specimens are in cylindrical in size. So we should always about that ASTM standard again for the compression test, which is E9, can be used to test it. So please refer the standard dimension before testing. The major crucial parameter for the compression test is L by D ratio. So the L by D ratios need to be chosen in such a way that it can be compressed only. It should not happen buckling in the specimen. That is a major intention which are preferably noticed and mentioned in a ASTM standard. So the L by D ratio need to be chosen is very carefully, and the friction plays a very crucial role in a compression test. There is always a high chance to slip the material when you start applying the load. So it should be gripped properly. The surface should be very flat, both surfaces, so that gripper cannot be slipped. You have to take care about the friction, and usually the compression can be done up to 60% compression or 50%, that's it, not more than that. And here the nature of an stress strain graph is pretty different than the tensile test. Here we used to get the tensile graph like a true stress strain graph. So where you should know where to stop it and to get the material properties. That is very essential. That is very essential. Why it is mentioned the layer compression test? Because we used to calculate the biaxial anisotropy parameter by using compression machine. So we used to take the specimen like a coil, 1 mm thickness and some particular diameter, let us say 40 or 50 mm. So we used to prepare that specimen and we used to stick with each other, 5 to 10 specimen by using some glue. And then we used to start compressing it. So after compressing it, the specimen, circular shape specimen will become ellipse, and then measure a change in a diameter longitudinally in a transfer direction, which will give the value of an biaxial anisotropy coefficient. That's why here it is mentioned the layer compression test. It's nothing, don't get confused with the layer compression test. And the third most usually prefer for the many application, like just for example, you can say the spinning operation, incremental forming operation. Then you can say electromagnetic forming. So such kind of an forming usually used to be done at very high test, high standard. This is not like a traditional kind of an forming. This is a specialized forming technique which are operated industrial forming, which are preferably used as a high standard. So I cannot test the material in a tensile test or compression test and use the same data for electromagnetic forming or spinning process. So for such kind of a process, it is always necessary that we can replicate the same strain rate while testing the material. Therefore, I cannot do the testing of a material by using our uniaxial tension machine for high strain rate. So whenever you want to go for a high strain rate, means above than 100 second inverse as a strain rate, we should opt a split Hopkinson pressure bar test. There are many other techniques are also there, impact testing and all, but SHPB test is very popularly used. So here they used to keep the specimen in between the Hopkinson bar test and the input and output bar. And then we, by using this numerical accelerator, will hit this input bar against this output bar, so that specimen will get deformed. The the displacement sensor need to be attached to the specimen to get recorded the load displacement data. So in that way, usually we used to test the high standard test. So we have to choose the proper testing to understand the material response. So these are the three uniaxial testing which usually prefer for sheet metal forming application. So the benefit of using this, it's provide a quick tool for getting a material data. It is very easy to do it. Simplicity in the execution, understandable data, very well known literature, so that beginner or the researcher can easily calculate, do the testing, easily calculate the material properties. And it is pretty accurate to get the, to develop the material model and use it in a finite element simulation. But the challenges are high temperature testing, because thermal softening effects are also there in high temperature. Keeping the material constant is a one challenge. Thermal softening effects are there, friction effects are there. So these are the challenges, and still we are trying to tackle it. Researchers are trying to develop and modify the specimens, modify the components in such a way that to get a better and better result. So this is all about the uniaxial testing. Now coming to the biaxial or multi-axial testing. If you see the sheet metal forming any processes, it will never done, the state of stress of a specimen is never a uniaxial. It is always a biaxial or multi-axial, you can say, if I consider a three-dimensional component. But unfortunately, the multi-axial testing, the laboratory facilities are not available or not developed yet, which is not easy to do that. Measuring the stresses in all three dimensions are very tough. So what researchers are done, researchers have developed some biaxial testing facility, which is better than the uniaxial, because we are going closer to the multi-axial testing, and which are pretty accurate in case of a sheet metal forming, because the sheet thickness is very low. We can treat the component as a plane stress component. I hope you are aware about the plane stress and plane strain. So we are treating the sheet metal problems or plane stress problem. So by neglecting the third dimension, we can treat the component by axial testing, which will give a more accurate result. So just this is a comparison which are taken from the published research, which is published in 2012. Utilization of an bulge and uniaxial tensile test for determination of flow stress curve for selected anisotropic materials. So the researcher has shown the different data. These data are available for titanium. This is again for steel material. So if you see here, this is a uniaxial test. But this portion, which are highlighted here, is a biaxial test. Here also, if you see, these dotted lines indicate the uniaxial test, and this solid line indicate the biaxial test. So it is reported in the literature that, surprisingly, whatever the traditional way we are using the uniaxial tensile test is not at all accurate to predict the material response and behavior. The uniaxial tensile test, it may be tension or compression, only will give you a 30% of an material response. It is very surprising and bold statement I am making it. We can able to predict it only 30% of material response. Most of our finite element simulations and models struggle to operate accurately because of this reason only. because we are testing the material in some other state of stress domain. And in actual case, we have a different state of stress. And that will justify the requirement of an biaxial or multi-axial testing. So the multi-axial testing can able to predict 70 to 80% of an material response very accurately. So if you have the stress strain data by using any kind of an biaxial test, either bulge test or biaxial test, there are different ways to do that. You can able to closerly understand the material response, closerly calculate the material properties, accurately calculate the material properties, accurately develop the material models. So obviously your finite element simulation or packages will show a better result. So that is the difference, but we have very much limitation to use that. We will see that one is a cost. Machines are very costly. So that is a many hurdles and very limited places. Few IITs are having this facility. I think you have just listened to Professor Mishra's lecture. In their lab, they have the biaxial tensile test facility, which is built up around 6 crore rupees. So it is because we are straining the material from both directions. So the sophisticated machines are required very high cost, which is a big hurdle to use it. So the multi-axial state of stress or biaxial state of stress usually can be tested in a two-way. One is a bulge test, bulging of an specimen, and another is a biaxial test. So first we will see the bulge test. This is a schematic representation of an bulge before test and during test. So we have to just put the circular sheet in a gripper and we have to bulge it from the down, either by using, you can use a gas as a medium for the bulging, you can use a hydraulic oil as a medium for the bulging. So it is a contactless bulging process. So if I take the element here at dome, it will be in pure state of biaxial tensile, both side tension, without any friction involvement. So this is a true representation to get the biaxial state of stress or biaxial stress strain graph. But major challenges are capturing the strain point. We should have a high sophisticated high speed cameras from the top, extensometer from the top to measure this data against the bulge height. So you will get the load versus displacement data. You will get the load versus displacement data. So the major advantage of an bulge testing is there is no any specimen preparation. Only the circular blank can be used. Very easily prepared it. Very accurate results we can get. Pure biaxial state of stress we can get. And the difficulties are high cost machine and stopping the experiment at the nicking point or the failure points are very difficult. Creating a high pressure and maintaining it is again challenge, because maintaining a constant strain rate is a big challenge here. Big challenge here. So in order to avoid this drawback, the researchers are come up with the biaxial tensile test. So there are variety of biaxial tensile tests are used. Means if you see this machine which are firstly developed around 1970. So these are the 4 grippers, in which usually the plus size specimen we used to refer as a cruciform specimen. We used to put it and then apply a uniform load in both direction, X and Y direction, up to the failure. This is the one way of representation. The another way, but these machines are again very costly. These machines are very costly to build up, because we required 4 different actuator, load cell to control it. So we can able to do the symmetric biaxial test, unsymmetric biaxial test. Both are possible here. Apart from that, the few attempts of few researcher has done, how do you convert the uniaxial tensile test into a biaxial tensile test? And this is a one picture which are developed by us only. So I am also trying to make a biaxial fixture in such a way that it can be fitted on a uniaxial gripper. These are the 2 gripper we can fit in a uniaxial gripper. And this wedge mechanism will give the specimen will fit here, and this groove are there to give the moments to this arm, which are 45 degree. So because of this moment will start moving it, this uniaxial load will be transferred into a biaxial, and the symmetric biaxial test we are doing it. We are in the phase of an development. We have made the fixture, but because of this crisis and lockdown, we are unable to test it. We have to attach to our Zwick machine and we have to test the result. So I have built this setup only within the 1 lakh rupees. So this will be some replacement to the traditional biaxial testing. And few research are already done successfully. Abroad also in India in IIT Delhi, Professor Bhatnagar lab, they have developed this setup for the composite. We are trying to develop for the metal, because for metal, we require a high testing capacity. So we may get success in that, or we have to alter it further to achieve it. But definitely this is a one kind of an alternation to the replacement of a standalone biaxial testing machine. Standalone biaxial testing machine. And the hurdle or the problem of an biaxial testing machine compared with the bulge test tip, the specimen preparation. Specimen preparation is a more complex. We have to prepare such kind of a plus size specimen. Until now, there is no any standard has developed. Researchers are using the different dimensions as per their convenience. Up till now, there is no any specific standards are developed for this. That is a hurdle for that. These are the few dimensions which are taken from the literature. So the specimen preparation is really difficult. We have to use wire cut EDM. We have to make these grooves, slots, circular holes. Then the knurling at this gripper portion at this end. So it's really challenging to prepare the proper specimen, because the major issue is the specimen need to be failed from the gauge area. This is the gauge area. The center portion is the gauge area. So usually we have to weaken the specimen at the gauge area to get the result. Therefore, compare with the biaxial testing, the bulge test results are more accurate. Only the strain rate control, getting strain rate control is very difficult in case of an bulge test, which are easy in case of an biaxial. So both testing has its own pros and cons. So we have to wisely choose the appropriate testing to get the material response. And one more kind of a test where we always used to prefer is shear test, because many times the failure in the sheet metal forming is usually because of a predominant shear stress. So it is very essential to have the shear yield strength of a material. Usually what we used to do in case of a ductile material, we used to consider the 0.5 time the yield strength of a material as a shear stress. But that may not be applicable everywhere. According to Trusca's criteria, 0.5 time yield stress of a material. According to Van Mises criteria, it will be 0.577 time yield stress of a material. So if you don't want to test it, you can choose that material and you can design your setup in such a way that the stress value should not go beyond the shear yield limit of a material. Then only your component is safe when you do the finite element simulation. The other way is test it. So the shear component usually we test in a uniaxial machine only. Only the specimen has a different shape. If you see this specimen, it has made the groove in a 45 degree. And if you load it in this direction, you can able to get the in-plane shear yield stress value. In-plane shear yield stress value. So these are the overall material testing which is required for the sheet metal forming. Uniaxial tension test, uniaxial compression test. Then we can able to know the shear test. We can require biaxial test. And another parameter which I missed to put it in the slide is a anisotropy coefficient. Anisotropy coefficient means nothing but the how it is an indication that how the material properties will vary with respect to the orientation and shape. and it is proposed by the Langford. Therefore, it is popularly called as a Langford coefficient also. So usually what we used to do, take the tensile test specimen, mark 5-6 lines in a gauge length at an equal interval, measure its width and thickness, length and width of every segment as well as in thickness before testing it. Then put the load the specimen, start testing, and stop after the yield point before the ultimate. Let us say usually in 10% of an plastic elongation, 15% of an plastic elongation. So you have to do a trial and error to stop the machine for the 10% of an plastic elongation, 15% of an plastic elongation. If you have the sophisticated machining like you can roll what we have, you can give the program itself to stop after 10% of an yielding. And then remove the specimen, measure its length, width, and thickness after tested. And then by using the formula, you can able to calculate the Langford coefficient. It will indicate that whether the material has anisotropy, high anisotropy tendency or not. If it is having a high anisotropy tendency, it is difficult to deform it. Difficult means that the error or the erring tendency will be more in case of you if you have a high anisotropy coefficient. So usually we used to calculate as a normal anisotropy, planar anisotropy. So I'm not going in much depth in that because we have to cover a lot of things about the material modeling also. Formability test also. So now coming to the formability test, we used to, there are many again formability tests, but as a laboratory level, the researcher extensively used either deep drawing, which are simple to replicate it, stretch forming. So in a deep drawing, we can able to measure the limiting draw ratio. We can able to do the thickness distribution. We can able to measure the airing profile like this. Thickness distribution from one corner to another corner of a cup can be measured. Then limiting dome ratio, LDR, is nothing but the what are the diameter of a blank we can able to draw on it divided by a punch diameter. Give the capacity of a material we can able to form it. So if the higher LDR is there, means it has a better formability. Thickness distribution should be as uniform as possible. Try to avoid the excessive thinning, the airing tendency. This is called as a ear. Because if I want to use this component, I want to cut it from somewhere here. I cannot use it like this. This will create the excessive stress concentration. So this much wastage of a material will happen. So airing should be as low as possible. So if it is a highly anisotropic material, if you have a high planar anisotropy, you used to have a high airing tendency. So the airing can be minimized, cannot possible to eliminate it fully, but can be minimized it by optimizing the blank diameter. And this can be possible, all things study in a finite element packages. How do you optimize it? This is one kind of a wrinkling. So the wrinkling tendency also need to be reduced it. Now, apart from this, the stretch forming has extensively used to determine the forming limit, the safe forming limit. Usually we used to call as a forming limit diagram. The forming limit diagram is nothing but the diagram of a major strain versus minor strain. So obviously these are the specimen we used upon different dimension. If you see here, the width of an specimens are changed. This is a Nakajima standard, and the widths are we are varying it. The reason is the width varying to change the strain path. So this is a pure biaxial state of stress. It will move towards the plane strain condition because the FLT need to be covered from uniaxial state of stress to biaxial state of stress. All the strain point need to be covered to plot a complete picture of an material response or the strain carrying capacity of an material. Strain carrying capacity of a material. So this is usually called as a FLD. If you see here, this is a fracture point. So if if I take this specimen, if I stretch it up to the capture, usually you will get the points along this line. So this is a major strain, this is a minor strain, and the strain can be measured usually to grid on the specimen, stretch it, so the circular grid will become an ellipse, and try to measure the major and minor diagonal of an ellipse and try to calculate the strain. In that way, usually used to calculate the strain value. So here, capture points usually will be get along the strain line. Obviously, this is a biaxial region. Sorry, this is the called as a forming fracture limit along the straight line. Usually the nature used to be get along the straight line, and this is called as a forming limit curve, means about the nicking. So when you start stretching it, stop the test at the nicking when you see the visualized nicking. So you should have a arrangement to your hydraulic press in such a way that nicking can be visualized. So at the intermediate level, you have to stop your test and see the thinning, what is happening to the thinning of a shape to get the FLC value. And below that, all points used to call as a shape point. We are not going to discuss the wrinkling limit curve, which will be slightly complicated at this stage to discuss it. So as a researcher, we are always try to bother to plot this FLC line, which can discriminate the shape forming limit and unsafe forming limit. So it will get an overall idea how much we can strain the material to form it. And this is the setup we used for testing it. Hydraulic press. We have having a hydraulic press of a 40 ton capacity. This is an induction heating arrangements along this die. And we can heat the material up to around 500 degrees Celsius. We can control the temperature, and this is a computer operated machine. So we have the facility to test the deep drawing as well as the stretch forming, spring back by using the same machine. And this is a schematic diagram of it. And we used, and we are not using the Nakajima specimen. The reason behind is, again, Nakajima specimen is having a very large amount of punch and die. So if I want to form a FLD, you have to waste a lot of material, and we are testing a very high strength material. So usually we prefer to do a sub-size specimen. So there is another standard for the FLD to plot that is called as a HASAC specimen. You can please see in the literature, and that dimensions we are using it. So these are the dimensions, sub-size dimension to the Nakajima. It is well proven in a literature to use that. And this is the way you are measuring the points. These are the different strain paths. These are the different strain paths. So this region is usually called as a tension compression region, and this region is called as a tension region. So starting from the uniaxial test, so the uniaxial specimen will get the data point somewhere here. Plane strain specimen will get the data point somewhere here, and biaxial stress will get the data point somewhere here. So once you get the nicking along that dome where the nicking is present, you have to measure all the grids and mark the point. So here we have measured fracture strain, nicking strain, and shape strain values. So the 3 times you have to test the material at one condition to get all this point. So by seeing this, you will observe that FLD prediction is not easy. It is really tedious job. Much attention we need to provide it to get the trustworthy and accurate result, because measuring is a skill. Measuring is a skill, so we have to measure it with proper attention and very closely, repetitively, so that you will get the proper FLD curve or the FLC curve. And again, the major issues of, and this is called as a strain-based FLD. So the major problems with the strain-based FLDs are, it is highly sensitive towards the sheet thickness. If I change the sheet thickness, this line will move up and down. It is highly sensitive towards the lubrication. it is highly sensitive towards the what kind of a specimen you will use. So whenever you are using the subsize HASAC specimen, the bending effect, bending strain will also introduce in the material. So that bending strain need to be subsize or the subtracted from these values to get the accurate FLD. I'm not going in depth. You can refer our papers to have a better idea. So one more is a spring back. So the spring back can be in a deep drawn text can be measured by using a split ring test. And usually the standard, there are different kind of bending operations we can use in sheet metal forming, like L bending is there, U bending, V bending, C bending. So any kind of bending we can able to measure the initial dimensions of a punch or the angle of a punch and what the angle we got after the deformation, that usually called as a spring back. For the inconal case, we observe that the spring back varies from 2 to 8 degree. Generally, it may vary depend upon the what the elastic recovery of a material is there. So usually it's depend on the modulus of elasticity as a property, ductility of a material, yield stress of a material, what thickness of a material we are bending it. So there are many parameters again which affect the spring back. So this is all about the testing of a material. So now coming to the material model developed, as I mentioned, the material properties are highly depend on the where you are testing it, either in rolling direction, diagonal to the rolling direction, or transfer to the rolling direction. So these are the defects we already discussed. So now our intention as a researcher, because we always interested, industry or researcher are always interested to avoid the unnecessary experimental trial, and that can be easily achieved by using a effective and popularly used tool, finite element analysis. So finite element analysis is extensively dependent on what kind of a material model you will use. So material model we used to divide into two major parts. One is a hardening behavior. How do you predict the hardening behavior? And how do you predict the yielding response of a material? So hardening behavior can be predicted by using a constitutive models. It's popularly called as a hardening models or constitutive models. Yielding behavior will predict by using yield models. So now Langford parameter I already covered there, so I'm not going to cover here. The strain hardening exponent. So now coming to the material model. So as I mentioned, to get the accurate response of an finite element, we require constitutive modeling and yield criteria modeling. So what do you mean by constitutive modeling? Constitutive model is nothing but the theoretical or mathematical description of an stress-strain relation, which can be used to predict the material response theoretically. So usually the relations are built stress equal to function of an strain rate and temperature. So the equation for the constitutive modeler need to be write in such a way that sigma, the true stress, is equal to a function of an strain parameter, strain rate parameter, and temperature parameter. And I would recommend you to please go through a critical review done by Weisilin in 2011, which will give a clear-cut idea of what are the models are available for sheet metal forming application, different models, pros and cons of each model, and how do you determine the parameters of each. So overall, constitutive models are basically classified as a phenomenological based model or physical based model. The phenomenological based model means it is highly dependent on what kind of a particular trend are there. So it is called as an empirical equation. It don't have a physical base. So if you test the material, different kind of materials for the different loading condition for a larger domain, and if you try to fit the equation for that, So in that way, the researcher are developed many models which are easy to develop it. The other hand, the physical based model means it's depend on the different physical parameters, like what you say, the activation energy, thermodynamic sleep, the sleep system of a material. So it required a physical sense. So for the larger domain, the physical models having a larger adaptability compared with the phenological based model, because these models are highly sensitive with respect to the loading condition, with respect to what material we are using. And the third category is predictive model. Recently, the artificial neural network, support vector machine, genetic algorithm, there are many ways people are using it to predict the different response of a material. And one way is an artificial neural network. So therefore, constitutive models are classified into a three-way: phenological based models, physical based models, artificial models. There are again different types. Few I have mentioned here, like very popularly used Johnson-Cook model, then Arrhenius model, FB model, then Cooper-Simon model, KHL model. Physical models are Gerial Armstrong model and many more. So therefore, Vicelin 2011 review paper, you please go through it if you want to start working on a constitutive model. So just for the namesake, I have given one slide how this model will look like Cooper-Simon model. This is the equation, sigma. As I mentioned, always this is a true stress. Sigma, which is equal to a function of an strain value, strain rate value, E dot. Here the temperature parameter is not there. Cooper-Simon model is independent of an temperature. E is a modulus of elasticity, K is a constant, C is a constant, E dot is a strain parameter, N is a strain hardening exponent. Like that, different parameters are there. So you have to see these are phenological based model. So each parameters are dependent on another parameter. So there is a set of procedure to evaluate it. So usually people will use MATLAB code, very simple code. It's not very complicated models are also there. So based on your testing data, flow stress data, especially we want a flow state data in a plastic region. So if you start fitting this data, you will get what is the value of A, what is the value of B, what is the value of N, what is the value of C, what is the value of M. So like that, these models need to be developed, and mostly these models are inbuilt available in many commercial finite element softwares. Like JC model, you will see is pretty available in all this kind of a software. So if you have this constant for your material for same loading condition, so if let us say you are thinking to take it from the literature, you should be cautious that what kind of a condition that models or the constants are arrived that need to be matched with your condition. Otherwise, I would always recommend it to have your own constants determined from this model and use it for the finite element simulation, so that finite element package know that what is the plastic behavior of a material. So it is essential that this model need to be fitted properly for your particular material. So how do you check the capability of these kind of models? So just for the one representative procedure I have mentioned here, how do you calculate it? So I'm not going in that depth. So you please have, I will share the slides with organizers so they can pass it to everyone. So in that way, it used to be predicted. This is a three-dimensional graph of strain rate, true strain, and true stress at different condition: room temperature, 200 degree, 400 degree, 600, 700 degree, and at different three standard. So this is really a beautifully present. This is taken also from our paper only. Because in one graph, we are able to present all three different strain rate and different temperature. So you should know, if you want to publish more and more paper, how do you concisely represent your data. If I want to represent this in a two-dimensional, I should have presented at this strain rate one graph, this strain rate one graph, and this strain rate one graph. Means three images I need to present it. Here, instead of that, I can able to finish it in one image. That is the beauty of three-dimensional graph. So how do you compare it? So the experimental results need to be closely matched with the predicted result. So the experimental points are shown here by the solid line, and predicted points are shown by a just for the symbol. So if you see here, it is pretty accurate everywhere. The deviation is not less, but how do you count it? How do you quantify it? So the quantification can be done by using, one is by correlation coefficient. The another is you can calculate the average absolute error, root mean square error, and you can calculate the standard deviation of an error. So this is the usual standard practice how the models can be compared with the experimental result, either by using correlation coefficient, either by using average absolute error and its standard deviation, either by using root mean square error. So there are different error can be calculated, standard deviation can be calculated, and then based on that you can say that this particular model is better for your material. Now coming to the yield criteria, as I mentioned, the major challenge for the sheet metal forming is it's highly anisotropic. So if you see the inbuilt commercial finite element softwares like Abacus, LS-DYNA, ANSYS, you will see that 1 MISIS is a yield criteria which is by default present for the simulation. But as these materials are anisotropy, 1 MISIS is an isotropic yield criteria. So I cannot use the 1 MISIS yield criteria to fit it to get the desired accurate result, because material response may not predict very well. So we should use necessary to use the anisotropic yield criteria for that. Therefore, it is essential to develop the anisotropic yield criteria. Again, there are many yield criteria are available in the literature. If you go and see the Banabik book on a material modeling of the sheet metal forming application, you will find it out very good information about the different constitutive model, different yield criteria. So, as I mentioned, the isotropic yield criteria are basic, which cannot be used for sheet metal forming, like Pruska yield criteria, 1 MISIS yield criteria. The other yield criteria, which are anisotropic coefficient parameter, are involved, like Hill 1948, Ballard 1989, Ballard 1986, Ballard 2000, Kazaku Ballard, and many more. He'll have a different series like Hill 1973, Hill 1990. There are many Banabik yield criteria, BCC yield criteria, KHL yield criteria. Few I have mentioned it here because it is not possible to plot the all yield criteria here. So yield criteria is nothing but the equation represented in such a way that principal stress component compare with the yield stress. So as we know that the stresses developed in the actual material should not cross the yield stress tested in a uniaxial condition. That is the yield criteria. So the yield, same condition is there for the anisotropy, only we are introducing the anisotropy parameter. So the yield locus we used to plot against principal stress sigma 1 and sigma 2 plane. So if I test the material in a uniaxial tension case, you will get the data point somewhere here. If I test in a biaxial compression test, you will get the data point somewhere here. If I test in a shear test, you will get the data point somewhere. So you should test your material for a particular yield criteria, how the experimental data points are matching with the locus. That is the way usually the yield criteria can be tested. So if you see the Hill 1948, which are popularly used in industry and very easy to determine it, the Hill criteria, the different parameters are tested, like G is a one parameter, H is another parameter, F and N, these are the 4 constants which can be calculated by using the value of R0, R45, R90 and sigma Y. R0 is anisotropic coefficient in 0 degree orientation, 45 degree, 90 degree and sigma. So if I have these 4 values and put it here, I can able to calculate the G value, H value, F value and N value. And these are some additional constraints based on the sigma value. So I can able to calculate the yield locus for Hill criteria and constant. Similarly, for the Ballard, we can able to calculate. So these two are extensively used in industry because this yield criteria can be able to develop by using only uniaxial tension or compression test. The additional tests are not required. So this is, I try to consolidate the everything, what are the tests are required for the different yield criteria. Again, at this floor, it is very difficult to show you how the models are developed because we have to write the mathematical code. You should have some understanding about the basic about the theory of elasticity, plasticity to understand this code. So I'm giving the general overview, what kind of an yield criteria and model can be used for the sheet metal forming. So few yield criteria I have noted down here. Hill 1948, Ballard 89, 96, 2000, Kazaku Ballard, number of parameters required. Usually each parameter required one test. So Hill 1948 involved 4 parameters. So that can be determined either by calculating the yield stress at 0 degree, 90 degree, and 2 R0 and R90 value. The another way you can calculate it by calculating R0, R45, R90 and sigma 0 value. The another way you can try the combination sigma 0, sigma 45, sigma 90 and R0. So these all possible combination can be used by using uniaxial tensile test to calculate Hill 48 parameters. Again, Ballard 89 will require only 4 parameters. Therefore, these two criteria are extensively used in the industry. The remaining we used to call as an advanced yield criteria, which required 8 tests. If you see here, we required all sigma 0, sigma 45, sigma 90. Similarly, R0, R45, R90. Similarly, we required biaxial yield stress and biaxial anisotropy coefficient. That can be required by axial machine or multi-axial test condition. Therefore, we have a limitation to do that. We should have such kind of a sophisticated facility if I want to develop Ballard 96, 2000, Kazaku Ballard. In all cases, these are required. So as you become more and more, so if the material is very complex, for example, if you take the titanium grade 5 alloy, 2-phase alloys, inconel alloys, high strength alloys, DP steel, dual phase steel. So whenever you are having a multiple phase, material is more complicated to predict the yielding. In that case, this advanced yield criteria need to be used. For the routine material like a steel, aluminum, the Hill 48, Ballard 89 will give a more accurate results. And this is the way usually it has to compare it. These are the experimental point. And these are the predicted yield locus at different conditions. Another way to calculate the capability of an yield criteria by using normalized yield stress and anisotropy coefficient along the orientation and how it will fit. That will also give the idea about the capability of an yield criteria. Recently, in one research paper, they have mentioned the new parameter to analyze the capability of an yield criteria that is called as a global performance evaluation index, which is depend on these 3 parameters, I, delta and gamma. These are the equation which we can use to calculate it. We have calculated for DP 590 steel these values of different values. Apart from that, there are few theoretical models which we can use to predict the theoretical forming limit. These are the few models I have mentioned, semi-empirical models, which are very easy to develop by using only uniaxial tensile test. Few other models are there based on diffuse necking, Swift-Hill criteria, SR models, BW models, and some physical models are there. Most popularly, we use MK model. And whatever we have seen the constitutive models and yield criteria that need to be go as an input for predicting a forming limits. So as accurate you have a constitutive model and yield criteria to predict your material response, you have a better representation of a finite element simulation. We have a better prediction of an theoretical models so that your overall experimental triad can be minimized. So I think it's time up. I have few more points to discuss it, but anyway, I will try to quickly wind it out. So the MK model, which I mentioned, extensively used and most realistic mathematical model for the development, which is used for the in-plane stretching, and which is mainly based on the thickness imperfection factor, which is used for like F0. So this is a theoretical model. We used to consider a plane stress slab where we have a groove which is perpendicular to the x-axis 90 degree, and we realize that because of this groove the material will fail from here. We are weakening the material here. It's called as a thickness imperfection factor, TA by TB. This is a TB, this is a TA. So these are the few results from my recent papers, which are just recently accepted in Journal of Manufacturing Process elsewhere. It has not come online till, just it is accepted, it will come soon. We have developed the different models to predict the theoretical forming limit. Damage models also we have developed. Damage model part we have not put it here. So for the current trend of an sheet metal industry is to get more accurate and trustworthy numerical results. And if I want more accurate result means you should have a more sophisticated models developed. If you want a more sophisticated required model to develop means you have more trustworthy input material properties or material which require many testing. So overall sheet metal forming material response is not an easy thing. You have to test a material at the different level, uniaxial level, biaxial level, compression testing, and then you have to develop based on that many models, constitutive models, yield criteria, damage models, and many times these models are not fully available on a commercial software. So you have to write your own codes to incorporate, or the VMAT or UMAT to incorporate this model in a commercial software. And then you have to run the simulation. Simulations will take a lot of time. Sometimes it will take, one simulation will take more than 1 day. You require sophisticated high-end servers to do that. So in overall, the research on sheet metal forming is very costly affair. You require a strong collaboration because one individual may not have all these facilities. You should require a strong collaboration with among the researcher to perform the experiments, validate it, develop the numerical tools, numerical codes, models. Future trend, now people are slightly shifting towards the high temperature forming, which is a very recent area because to form the component, high strength component where the ductility is limited for aerospace application, nuclear application. So there are many experimental challenges are also there to do the testing at high temperature. And similarly, they develop the models for high temperatures. Finite elements of simulations are again the challenges because we have to do the thermomechanical simulations, not only the mechanical simulations. Friction plays a very crucial role, how to measure the friction accurately. Very limited experimental setups are available for friction measurement. So these are the challenges researcher will always curious about to analyze it and predict it in a better way. So that's it from my side. Now I open the forum for the discussion. If you have